Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I have another recent reads video for you. So I'm going to talk about 6 different books today that I have read relatively recently. We'll see how this goes because some of the books I'm going to talk about I feel like I read eons ago for some reason and I'm struggling to remember what I thought about them. So this could get interesting. I have to be honest, I've been having some trouble thinking of video ideas lately. I'm not necessarily getting burnt out on doing videos and booktube. I'm just feeling burnt out trying to think about ideas. So down below, if you have any types of videos you'd like to see me do, please put suggestions down below because I'm really struggling thinking of things, to be perfectly honest right now. But for today, let's keep it simple and we'll do some recent reads, all right? So let's go ahead and jump into the first book. So the first one is Aurora's End by Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff. I smashed their names together. This is the last book in the Aurora Cycle series, the third and final book trilogy. And this is one of the ones I was having trouble remembering what I thought about it. I did give it 4 stars, so I did like it. I would say it's probably my least favorite out of the series, which I think is overall generally what most people have kind of felt about this last book. It's still really good. Per the style of Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff, really high stakes. I just realized I didn't describe the plot of this series. Let me just give you an idea of what it is if you haven't heard of it before. This series is a sci-fi YA series that is very fast-paced and fun. We are following this misfit crew of young adults who have found themselves together on a ship, piloting and commanding a ship together, and they end up in the middle of a intergalactic conspiracy, and they need to save the universe. And it's a lot of fun. There are, I think, 6 or 7 different POVs in these books, which is actually a lot of fun. We get to see inside the head of all the different crew members, and they're all sarcastic and funny, and I love them, and I adore them. And like I said, Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff always end up having very fast-paced plots, very high stakes, and this definitely was no exception. I will say it's not that it didn't end well. I didn't overly love the way that this story ended necessarily. It just wasn't as satisfying as I would have liked. Some of the plot points and some of the plot gimmicks, I could say, I can't say what they are because I don't want to ruin anything. There are some kind of sci-fi plot gimmicks that are in this book that I'm not the biggest fan of. Having to do with time in a way, and it just wasn't something that I overly loved. It made it very repetitive, which I knew was the point of it, but I didn't love that part as much, so that was a little bit slow for me. I know that's extremely vague. Like I said, I just don't want to ruin anything for you if you haven't read the series and you want to, but I love this particular character. This is Finn. If you haven't met him, he's amazing, and I adore him, and I love that he's on the cover in this book, even though he looks super creepy. But I really adored the whole crew. I adore the characters. I loved the general idea of the story. I love how fast-paced it is. I love how funny and sarcastic it is. It's super serious and also really hilarious at the same time, and I really, really love that. I love that balance of that mix, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I'm sorry that was extremely vague, but I feel like that's all I can tell you about it at the moment. The next one was one of my most anticipated releases for 2022. It is V.E. Schwab's newest book, Gallant. And this one, you guys, first of all, I wish I had a physical copy of it because it is absolutely beautiful book. And I was able to borrow it from the library, a physical copy at the time. I don't have it with me anymore, and I loved getting to read the physical copy because it's so stinking pretty. There are some illustrations in it, and it's just beautiful. This particular story I really enjoyed because it had that dark, spooky atmosphere that I love. It was about this girl who has been living in an orphanage her entire life. That was my dog, if you heard that. She's been living in an orphanage her entire life, and the only thing that she has of her family is this old journal that her mother had filled out, where her mother had kind of slowly slipped into madness, and she's read this journal and has it practically memorized. But there was this place called Gallant, which is, I guess, the family home that in the book her mother kept saying, don't ever go there, don't ever go there. And of course she ends up going there. She ends up going to this family home Her family has written to her and said, hey, we want you to come and stay with us now instead of being in this orphanage. And she goes there, and it's a really spooky place, and lots of spooky things happen, and she starts to learn what happened to her mother all those years ago. And I love the atmosphere of a spooky, dark Victorian manor. It just makes my heart beat fast, and I love it. The vibes of this book are immaculate. V. Schwab nailed it with the vibes. It had like this dark secret garden vibe to it that I was just living for. I just really loved it so much. I have to admit, the plot itself isn't really sticking with me as much as I would like it to, but I remember the vibes of this just being absolutely fantastic. So, if you like spooky, old, haunted manor vibes, if you love that, you will love this. It's also a very quick read. I read it almost, I feel like, in one sitting. I read it really, really fast. It moves very quickly, and I adored just the vibes this gave, and I highly recommend. I gave it 4.25 out of 5 stars, so go for it. It's so good. I love V. Schwab and her writing. It's just kiss. Okay, here's another one I'm going to have trouble remembering what I thought about it. It's the third book in the Mirror Visitor Quartet, and that is The Memory of Babel, or Babel, however you want to pronounce it, by Christelle Dabos. Again, this is the third book in this series. I am actually currently reading the fourth book and almost done with it. I'm hoping to finish it after I finish recording this video. I want to get it done. I'm excited to finish out the series and see how it ends. This book, I feel like, is a blur. I can kind of remember what happened in it, but I feel like I can't talk about it much because, again, it's the third book and I don't want to ruin anything. This series, we follow this young woman who is living on this floating ark, or a floating island. This is what the world has now become. Our Earth, the ground has split up and broken up and is now floating into different arcs or different islands throughout the world. Each arc has developed its own unique abilities of the people that live there. Our character Ophelia, I actually remembered a character's name, which is amazing. Ophelia, she is a mirror visitor, which she's able to travel through mirrors, and she's also able to read objects and even animate objects, which means she can touch an object and she can see all the people, she can see in her mind all the things that have happened when that object was in contact with different people and all those kind of things. And she ends up in an arranged marriage with a man who is on a different arc, and that particular arc, their main thing is illusions, and also other people that are able to cause harm to others, like they're able to attack somebody's nervous system without actually touching them. Anyways, she ends up in this arranged marriage and has to move away from the arc that she's known her entire life and move to this other arc, and there's lots of political intrigue and all sorts of crazy things happen. Every single cover of these books are absolutely beautiful, so look at that. It's gorgeous. This has been such a complex series. There's so much going on. There's so much world building. It is very well done, and it's such an immersive world. It's personally a little bit too complex for me. When I say that, I don't mean that I don't understand it. I do. I'm able to understand it and keep up, but there's just so much. There's so much background and intrigue between all these different arcs and where these powers came from and all these things, and there's just a lot. I'm not used to reading books that have such in-depth world building. I read a lot of standalones. I'm used to like get in, learn about what's going on, and get out. And this one, there's just like each book you delve more and more and more into the intrigue of this entire world that we're learning about. And it's fascinating, but it's a lot. It feels a little overwhelming sometimes. I will say the third book is really good, but it was probably not one of my favorites out of the series. This one, I think each book we've had a different, no, we haven't, sorry. This third book is where we're a little bit in a different locale, and I didn't like the location of the third book nearly as much. I just wasn't as into it. Maybe it's because I felt like I was starting over in a way. The first two books we're continually building upon a certain place and certain people, and then I feel like we're uprooted and kind of moved on into another section of this world, and I felt like we had to restart with some world building, which felt a little exhausting to me by the third book. I'm like, I just want to have plot and not feel like I'm trying to learn characters and the politics of a different place, and I don't know. So I felt a little bit underwhelmed with this one, or overwhelmed in a way, because it was just a lot. So it was still really good. That's why I'm saying, though, I'm anxious to kind of finish out the series. It's heavy to me, a lot of information to try to keep up with and learn. So I'm looking forward to kind of just finishing the series, being like, that was great, that was nice, let's set it aside now. So I gave this one 4 stars. Sorry, I've got my notes here so I can remember. I gave Memory of Babel 4 stars. So it was good. I still highly recommend the series. It's really good, especially if you like more complex fantasy series. I'm actually not sure if if the Mirror Visitor series is considered YA or adult, but it's quite complex. So to me personally, it feels like more of an adult fantasy series, not because of the content, but just the complexity, if that makes sense. Okay, moving on. I finally got around to reading Tiger Lily by Jodi Lynn Anderson. I love Jodi Lynn Anderson's work. So many of her books I've really, really loved. And this one I ended up enjoying a lot. It is what it sounds like from the name. It is a kind of a retelling of Peter Pan. We are in Tiger Lily's perspective and about how she meets Peter Pan and how she grows a fondness for him and honestly falls in love with him. And it was a really, really well done story. I love Jodi Lynn Anderson's storytelling because she's pretty heavy hitting. This one I believe is a YA. It's not a middle grade. This is a YA book. It hits some heavier topics. And I really do love the fact that, like, it's set in Neverland, right? So there's still a lot of whimsy, and we have that childhood feeling of, oh, it's Peter Pan and it's the Lost Boys and all that kind of stuff. But it's heavy hitting and dark at the same time. And I love that mixture. I love it when you take something that's so whimsical and childlike and then you throw in real life in there and you just kind of like mix it all up. And I really enjoyed that. I loved Tiger Lily's character. I loved the different perspective, because usually when we read a Peter Pan retelling or something having to do with Peter Pan, usually you're reading in the perspective of the Lost Boys, or you're reading in the perspective of Wendy coming from outside of Neverland. And I really enjoyed reading this story, this well-known location of Neverland, from the perspective of the Native Americans, or, you know, the Native people that were on Neverland, and from Tiger Lily's perspective, and how she's interpreting all the things that are happening and people arriving on Neverland, like Wendy, and like all the things. I really liked it. I felt like it was really well done. And I can't really think much more to say other than that. Again, this is another one I feel like I've read a while ago now for some reason, and I'm having trouble remembering exactly how I thought and felt about everything. But this was really well done, and I liked it. Was a unique perspective of that I personally felt like I've read of Neverland and Peter Pan. So that was really fun. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. So quite good, y'all. Okay, 2 more left. Hang in there with me. Okay, the next one is another one that's in a series. I'm trying to, as you can tell, I'm trying to keep up with and also finish up series. This one is going to be ongoing for a while. It is the 3rd book. I hope I'm right. It might be the 4th, 3rd or 4th book. Let's say 3rd book in the Keeper of the Lost City series, called Everblaze. I feel like I've repeated the description of this series a bajillion times, but in case you don't know what the Keeper of the Lost series is, as I'm tongue-tied, it is a middle grade behemoth of a series. It's like 8 or 9 books so far. I say so far because I think there's still more that are in the series coming. They're all chunkers, but they're so much fun. We are following this girl named Sophie, and she's been living in our normal human world, and she has been struggling with the ability to be able to hear people's thoughts. But she hasn't told anybody about this because she doesn't want people to think she's crazy or end up in some place where they're going to poke around with her brain. So she's constantly living with the fact that she's able to hear other people's thoughts. She's also extremely smart, to the point where she is already, I think she's like entering into college, and she's only like 12 or something. She's just super, super smart and always has felt super out of place. Come to find out, this is in the description of the book, I promise, not a spoiler. Come to find out, she is not human at all. She's actually an elf, and she gets whisked away to a completely different world, basically, where the elves live. And she goes to magic school and finds out that she actually has magical powers. And part of her magical powers is her ability to be able to read people's thoughts and all these things. And we're introduced to this whole other world. There is so much world building and intrigue, but in a fun way. It doesn't feel overwhelming like the Mere Visitor series. And this gives me so much Harry Potter vibes, it's ridiculous. It's just that like good feels Harry Potter vibes. Having Sophie, watching her grow up, I think that's the most fun part about this series so far, is like getting to watch her grow up like we watch Harry Potter grow up, and seeing the friendships that she has, the friends that she draws closer to, and then some that she loses, and the parental figures that come into her life and all those things. And it's a lot of fun. There's always a lot going on. There's a lot of plot movement, and it's a very fast-paced series, which is good because the books are huge. They're really intimidating when I look at them. I look at those, and it took me so long to start the series, but I'm so glad I did. This one, what did I give this one? I gave this one 4.5. I have been trying to read one of these books a month, and they're kind of running together for me about like which book is about what. I do remember this particular book having some pretty heavy-hitting stuff, and I love it. I love it. I already said this about another book, but I love it when more middle grade books or young adult books have moments where like they just punch you in the gut. And this one had some of those, had some moments of just like, oh, like just some heavy moments, some shocking moments, some plot twists that you're not expecting. Like, I love that about the series. People deal with death and deal with mourning and deal with pain and sadness and depression, and like people deal with real stuff in this fantasy setting. And I just think it's so cool. And I kind of love it when I'm reading a book and you're kind of reading along. You're like, oh, it's all fantasy and it's great and it's fun. And then all of a sudden something just punches you in the gut and you're like, I did not expect this to go that deep. And it just does. So I really enjoy that about the series a lot. It seems to be getting darker as we read along, which again reminds me of Harry Potter. About when you first start Harry Potter, it's a lot more light, and then as you go along, you're seeing Harry deal with heavier and heavier things and darker things, and that's what's happening with Sophie too. And so it's really fun to watch her grow up and just see her go through all these things. And yeah, so it's really good. I'm really enjoying it. 4.5, even though I don't fully remember every single thing that happened. Okay. Oh, last one. I feel like I've been talking a mile a minute. All right. The last one that I'm going to talk about today in this video is Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger. This is a book that I had on my TBR for the absolute longest time. In this story, we are following this, I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the tribe. She and her family are Native American. Again, I'm so sorry. I don't have the back of the book to be able to look real quick to see the name of the tribe. I can't remember what tribe she's a part of. But she and some members of her family have the ability to communicate with the spirits of animals, specifically animals that have passed away, and are able to even conjure up like I think her grandmother has the ability to like conjure up a mammoth, like the ghost of a mammoth, and she has like a pet ghost mammoth. Anyways, so we have our character here, and her cousin, I believe it's her cousin or uncle, I think it's her cousin, he ends up dying in what looks to be a car accident, but she is certain that he was murdered, and she ends up going to the town he was living in to be there to kind of prepare for his funeral and everything. And at the meantime, she's also trying to investigate and find out what actually happened to her cousin. So murder mystery, right? And that sounded really cool because I love murder mysteries. I loved kind of the aspect of being able to speak with spirits and things like that. And I thought that was really, really fascinating and interesting. However, I will say, I didn't know as much about this book going into it as I feel like I should have, because I felt very disconnected and thrown off because there were certain things I was not aware of before I went into it. I'm pretty sure it's in the description. I just didn't read the description again to remind myself before I read it. This takes place in our current world, but a more fantastical one. What I mean by that is, like, fairies are a part of society, and different fantastical creatures are a part of society. Magic in general is a part of society, like the ability to like do magic and travel through fairy circles and all these things. I didn't know that going into it. So I was very confused when we felt like we were in a very solid real world setting, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, and then we're gonna go travel by fairy circle, and I'm like, what? Oh yeah, and then there's vampires too, and then it's just like, oh, and then that guy's a vampire, and I'm like, what is this book? I got very confused because I was not expecting it to be as fantastical as it was, but like in a realistic way. It was just like, oh yeah, there are vampires and there are fairies, and that's normal. You know, it wasn't like, I don't know. Anyways, I got very thrown off. So because of that, I struggled to connect with the story and feel fully engrossed, because I kept consistently being thrown off of like, oh, this is a thing in this world? Okay. So I didn't end up loving it as much as I hoped I would, and I think that's the main reason, to be perfectly honest. I struggled to connect with the characters. I struggled to connect with the plot because I felt continually thrown off of what this world was supposed to be, the concrete idea of this whole world. So if I'm not able to understand it from the start and I keep feeling confused, then I'm going to have trouble clicking with it. But as a whole, the story was really cool. I liked the direction it went. I was interested in it, and I thought it was a really, really good book and really different and unique for sure. I just had trouble connecting with it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5. So I, again, just didn't love it as much as I had expected to. Still good. It was just a little bit too, I don't know, a little weird for me, to be perfectly honest. That's the easiest way I can say. Just kind of weird. So there we go. All right. So those are all the books that I read relatively recently. I have several more books to talk about, and probably another wrap up relatively soon, or recent reads video. Again, let me know down below if you have any kind of videos you want to see me do. Also, let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on those, but appreciate you watching. This side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. And this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock. Don't forget to keep reading.